Good morning, Australia. And Australia's independent craft brewers, congratulations. I want to thank Kath McLean and Brad Rogers for coercing me to be here. I told Brad last night it's all his fault. And Alexis, I'm excited. You're over here somewhere. I think I'm excited to see what the journey holds for you as you take this organization into its next big, powerful phase, because it's pretty exciting to be here for what I understand is your inaugural year of the new banner IBA. And as an American brewer, I think you were wise and brave to really look at your language and say, maybe independent more than craft is what we want to focus on. So a short disclaimer, my story is an American one, and so I am guaranteed to get some inferences about where we're similar and where we're different wrong. I am going to talk a bit about New Belgium, not because that's always makes me feel a little queasy among brewers, but I think there are learnings in there, and I'll pull those out as we go along. And then I'm also going to talk about the industry and where I see us going and where there are similarities and differences. I'm hoping we'll have time for some Q&A too, so I will try to get, this will be like speed dating speaking so that we can get to those as well, because I don't know about you, but I think those are some of the most interesting parts of being able to have people that you don't usually get a chance. I'm not here, this is my first time in Australia. I've had a lovely time, and you guys have been incredibly hospitable. But I wouldn't typically be here, and I want to be able to kind of wander through the what-ifs with you, so I hope we have time for that as well. So I'm going to start with our creation story. This was actually before Jeff and I were even married. He took a trip in 1988 through Belgium. And he was a home brewer at the time, and he tried some beers and came back to the U.S. and wanted to emulate some of the styles that he had, really come to love there. And as for all of us, those first beers, Ben, your epiphany beer, those first beers kind of get your wheels turning. But those were early years for craft brewing and having the wheels turning. But that trip was essentially how Fat Tire got its name. We decided we wanted to be New Belgium Brewing Company, and there are ramifications of that I'll talk about later, because I don't think we understood then how much license and latitude that would give us to do interesting things. And before Jeff and I ever made any beer, we took a hike in Rocky Mountain National Park, and we took notebooks along, and we sat on some boulders, and we talked about what we wanted this baby company to be. That I think there's a learning in this. For Jeff, we were going on a hike, so he was winning. For me, I'm a social worker by training. So there was that, we got to use vivid words and really talk about the vision for our future, so I was winning as well. You might have noticed, though, that there was nothing in there about customers, and there was nothing in there about coworkers, and that's because we didn't have either one of those yet, and it didn't occur to us that maybe we ought to, do something about those as well. So with our coworkers, about 4 years later, we reconfigured what it was we were going to stand for, how we were going to behave as a brewery. That, what I showed you before, is what we call our core values and beliefs. This is our purpose. And I will talk about this both as a learning and also for the industry. I really feel like codifying what you stand for. For us at New Belgium, I think the volume just went up or I got closer. Can you hear me in the back there? Okay. For us at New Belgium, this has been hugely powerful in our success as a company, because we were really able to understand, why do we exist? Where are we going? That's our mission, which is an internal sort of directive to us that we don't share outside of the company, and how we're going to behave. And all of those things we called our vision. And anyone at New Belgium can tell you about that. And it's really something that we reference really regularly, and it's a living part of our organization. So these are, this is the good old days, part one. I've only showed this picture a couple of times because it's horrifying. This is our basement. So our basement was about half the size of this platform that I'm standing on. I'm wearing sweatpants, it's true. And I can only hope that I'm wearing sweatpants because I was pregnant with our second son, Nick. I have a little bit of a story about that. The GABF is a Thursday, Friday, Saturday event. And in the good old days, you served your own beer. We actually do that again now, but they had a period in between where you didn't. So this would be a year from this, or 9-ish months from this picture. We served our beer on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I had Nick, our second son, on Wednesday, and we moved into our new brewery at 350 Linden, out of the basement into the new brewery on the following Monday. And I tell that story because that's kind of what it does make me feel a bit like a badass, but also I tell it because that's what entrepreneurs do. There are times where you understand that, you're in this to win it. And there are a lot of things going on. And so Nick came with me to the brewery when he was, 5 days old. And I set up a little nursery next to my desk, and until he could walk, he was there at the brewery. So he's definitely a brewery baby. So that's good old days one. This is the kettle that was in that brew house. This is actually in our second location, but it's kind of the only picture of it that I have connected. It's a 4 hectoliter brew kettle. We actually at New Belgium work in hectoliters, so when you talk in metric, we do hectoliters, we do barrel conversions, and then we talk in case equivalents, which in the US is what we do for sales, so we're multilingual that way. One of the things I'm going to point out, because I'll be talking about this later, is, I hope I didn't just, is there a pointer on this? Sorry. Green laser button. That right there is a heat exchanger. It has I know it looks like a trash can from Ace Hardware. Yeah. But inside of that is a copper tube, and we would run cold water through that tube to recover the energy from the boil so that we could use that in our next brew. One of the things that we'll be talking about here is how we make choices that are consistent with what we said matters. In the beginning, you saw one of the things we wanted to be was environmental stewards. And so we made choices big and small, and I'll show some of those later. This is Good Old Days Part 3, which is Peter Buchart. He was so young in this picture. I picked it because it just makes me happy to see him there. Unfortunately, it's blown up, not a great picture, but this was when we bottled La Folie. The first time we bottled it, which was in probably 1997. We decided we were going to get a hot tub, we were going to have a big party, we were going to kind of make this a pagan ritual experience we were going to have, except we bottled beer until like 3 a.m, so we didn't get to do any of those things. But the other reason that I put it up there is that in 1995, Jeff decided we were building 500 Linden, which is the brewery that we're still in, the one that was in that very first picture. And Jeff decided that he had really taken New Belgium as far as he could technically. And I've always really admired that, and I think that's another learning is it's important to play to your strengths and to also, we tend to think we have to do all of this stuff forever. And it's good to be able to recognize that I'm better at this and I'm not as good at this and I need someone to help me do these things. So that's kind of the learning there. So we were growing this company culture, and I read a book called The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack. He's the father of the open book management movement, which is, I don't know if that, reaches into Australia, but I was trying to look for ways to engage our coworkers. We had a baby, we had Nick's older brother, Zach. We were running this business as fast as we could, and we really needed to depend on our coworkers to help us make really good decisions. And so I read this book, and it took us on the journey of opening up our books to all of our coworkers. We did a little quiz. I said, we took in $100. We spent it on raw materials. We spent it on labor. We spent it on other things that are, that a business needs to have. How much money did we have at the end of that? And people said, the typical answer was $60. Well, those of you who look at, you're laughing back there, those of you who look at your P&L know that you'd practically kill for a 60% net margin. And it made me realize that the truth was a lot more compelling than the story that people were telling one another, and it gave me the courage to kind of step off the edge and say, it's going to be really powerful and helpful to the organization for us to be able to talk about the financials, train people on them, have them understand where the money goes. These are my coworkers. We get together every year for a retreat. We're kind of experts at the lap-bound clipboard, and we have a lot of people in the organization who are facilitators. So every year we gather a small group of people together and we say, what are the burning issues that we need to get our tribe together for to be able to talk about and get your input into? One of the other learnings we have is that people like to give input. They don't really like to give feedback, because feedback is sort of after it's happened and it resembles complaining a bit, where input is the energy that you have going into something. So that combination for us of open book management, we call this high involvement culture. And then the last one I'll touch on more later on is employee ownership. For us, that's been so powerful and an amazing way to be able to really drive what we call being a force for good, making our love and talent manifest and proving that business can be a force for good, while also, being profitable, and because that's kind of the ultimate form of sustainability. Here's another learning. I don't know if many of you know this woman. This is Lauren Limbach, used to be Lauren Salazar. She was recently married. Lauren started out working as an administrative assistant for us part-time. She had another job part-time. And she's now considered one of the world's leading experts on wood beer blending. And before that, she developed a sensory program for us that VLB, which is an organization out of Berlin, they audit breweries around the world. They came to audit New Belgium. And they said, we have never seen such a sophisticated sensory program in any brewery we've ever been to. And Lauren Salazar Limbach designed that by herself. She was also a social worker, her training was in social work. And, there's another learning. Kind of move out of the way and let people who are talented bloom into their roles, because it can be a great source of power. Just a little bit about our environmental work. You saw in our core values that that's something that we were committed to even when we only had 4 of them. We have one of the largest private solar arrays in the state. It used to be the largest, and I think somebody bested us on that one. We also have a process water treatment plant where we take the leftover nutrient from brewing, the whole brewing process, and we send it to an anaerobic digesters that creates methane. We ship the methane back to the brewery, and turn it into, run it through a combined heat and power plant and turn it into energy. And so about 20% of our energy is created between the solar. We tax ourselves internally to be able to pay for on-site renewable energy. We also do things like advocacy, because we think that brewers have we're not making mouse traps or door stops here. We're making something that's really sort of attractive and interesting for people. And there are things that are important, whether it's energy or clean water, to our livelihoods and to our well-being on the planet. And we are committed to that notion that what we say we want to do, we really want to, there's nothing worse for your coworkers than saying, yeah, we're really into, environmental stewardship, but yeah, we, put our chemicals to drain, or we, don't do the kinds that let our trucks idle when they don't need to. We don't do the kinds of things that actually show that that matters to us. We're also a B Corp. I don't know if many of you know about B Corp. I know the Stone and Wood folks do, because they are also one. So we're brethrens in this endeavor. And it's a really good way to hold ourselves accountable for making sure that the things, we say we want to do to make an impact are things that we're actually doing. And for us, the median score for companies being B Corps is 80, and ours was 143. So we're pretty psyched about that we're really hitting on a lot of cylinders across the organization. I told you that I would try to be fast about this. I didn't bring a watch up. Does anyone have a sense of where we are on time? 20 minutes left, 20 minutes in. Both, close to both, halfway. All right, that's perfect. So we started out with employee ownership slightly after we started Open Book Management. We gave our coworkers a 10% pot of money. We divided it up over a 10-year plan, and we gave away 6 months worth, so 20 slices of ownership. And then in the late 90s, the IRS said that S-Corps, which is our corporate taxable status, could be employee stock ownership plan owners. And so we switched from that phantom ownership to what's called an ESOP. And so at that point, we sold some of the brewery to our coworkers. And that created 32% ownership for them, and then Jeff and I and our kids own the rest of the company. Later on, Jeff left the organization. The company and I bought his shares. That reduced the denominator, and so they became 41% owners. So there I was as the board chair and CEO, kind of looking at, okay, what's the next step? And we'll talk about next steps for the industry too. This may come as news to you, but we're all going to need to do the next step. That might even be a euphemism for the life next step, because you've done this labor of love, and there is some kind of founder perpetuation, liquidity, succession strategy. And so for me, because we were at that 41%, it was kind of like we need to take one big jump over, because otherwise, it would have been 9-ish, 8.5%. And so in the very end of 2012, my sons and I sold the rest of our company to our coworkers. So we're 100% employee owned, which for us is, we were well suited to it because of all of the reasons that I talked about earlier. It's not without its difficulties. We have a repurchase obligation that we have to keep funded. And as you all know, this is a capital intensive business. So in addition to investing in equipment and renewable energy and a lot of other things we're doing, we're also needing to invest in our coworkers' essentially retirement funds. So, but that combination, that third leg of that stool, high involvement culture, open book management, and then employee ownership has been incredible for us. And I've talked with some of you who have been to our brewery, and over 27 years, I've talked to a lot of people who have, been kind of in our milieu and felt our vibe. And I think, generally speaking, people would say that it's palpable at New Belgium, that people are there really loving one another, really working at being excellent, and that's that love and talent piece. And they're also owners, and so it's a really kind of powerful model for us. Here's some other things that I think are just important learnings. On that last slide, this is an ownership ceremony here. So we get together once a year with our tribe, and new owners stand up in front of everyone and they talk for a couple of minutes about, we give them a list of 5 questions, they pick one and they talk about that question. Sometimes they sing songs or they do performance art, or there are all kinds of ways that they express their devotion to this notion. But, and I make mojos, and everyone at the end of the ceremony gets a mojo, and there are lots of places, there are hundreds of them at New Belgium, where we have these opportunities to come together. I know you guys do this in your organizations as well. And I don't think, this is not the case for everyone. There's something about being brewers that really brings us together for this opportunity to break bread, to slow down, to appreciate one another, to laugh, to tell stories. And it's really, I think, at the center of our movement together. So we're big fans of ceremony and ritual. This is a tour de fat, which is an in-house produced and branded festival that we do in several cities. Fort Collins is kind of the center of the deal. This is just something I couldn't help but be sure to include. I think it's easy as, we're getting bigger, and you guys as an industry are getting bigger, and you have an association that's rocking it, and there's legislative stuff to be done and market commercial stuff, to forget that, we are the newest inhabitants of a long line of artisans, and that I don't think we ever want to forget that we ply an ancient craft, and that it's an honor to be able to do that and to give it our very best attention. I mentioned Tour de Fat, so we do this in several places. I'm going to play a little clip here of the Fort Collins one to give you a sense. I'm sure it would be the largest bike parade, except Guinness says nobody can leave the parade or come into the parade until it's over, and you'll see that's just not going to happen for us. But here's what it looks like.
A little bit of churching up, it's good every once in a while to be completely immersed by, a mass of your peers that all say, hey, this is great, remember how great this is?
So, as I said, that's 25,000 people, curb to curb. That's so many people that people are coming back as people are leaving. But it's, people describe it as the best day of the year in Fort Collins, better than Christmas. And I don't think I mentioned that probably 75% of the Tour de Fat participants wear costumes, and some of them are, they spend weeks getting themselves ready for this big day. So it's pretty fun. And as a part of that, we donate the proceeds from the beer sale. So over the years, we've donated $5 million to bicycle nonprofits because we believe in the magic of the bicycle. It's been very good to us, but it's also, we think, a tool to help sort of save humanity on a few levels. And I really mean that. That may sound weird, but we're big fans. So we did not ride your local bike setup. We rented bikes, but Matt Brindelson did, and he said he had an awesome time. So in addition to Tour de Fat, we have been giving $1 per barrel away since 1994, so that's over $9 million now. And we work in healthy watersheds, renewable energy, local and sustainable food systems, and kids in wilderness, because it's hard as a brewer to give money to organizations for kids, because we feel like that's a bit dicey. We also don't sell onesies at New Belgium because it's weird to be, have a fat tire on a 1-year-old. But we are able to do that in other ways. And that's been, I think all of you know as entrepreneurs, I don't know if it was a surprise for you, but I was genuinely surprised at how great the opportunity was to make choices with profits, to do really satisfying things. And so between our own work in the building, which we say makes a splash, and the ripples we make as a brand, I have loved all of that. So just a very quick Asheville slide here. So I don't know how many of you have had the grow, no grow question, should we grow? We've probably had it more than 100 times at New Belgium because it's hard to sort of decide you want to do that. We went to Asheville, picked a brownfield site right on the river. You probably saw it, but so that was it in 1960. It was a real charmer, but it was right on the river. There was a lot of leaking, toxic mess going on here. We literally hauled away mountains and mountains of trash and recycled whatever concrete was there. There were a bunch of cattle barns on it as well, so we deconstructed all of those and took all of the street art and moved it into the brewery when we rebuilt. So that was pretty fun to do. And there's a shot of our brew house in Asheville, North Carolina. So it's a pretty sweet place to sit and have a beer over the river. I talked earlier about not really understanding the latitude that being New Belgium would have for us. We have 26 yeast strains in-house fairly regularly, which is, I think, an insane number. I don't know if that makes anyone else's eyes pop, but we've done a lot of creative things, and we started working on collaborations fairly early on, but we did a significant collaboration with Dick Cantwell and Elysian Brewing. For Dick and me, that led into new and interesting, fun things in our lives personally. But for New Belgium, it also allowed us to have a better presence in the Pac Northwest because we were brewing in their smaller breweries, and they were brewing with us there, and then we would also each brew in our breweries in Fort Collins so they could have some beer at scale. The other thing that did for us at New Belgium is really help us to understand hops better, because even though we had done a lot of innovation, we really didn't know a lot about brewing hoppy beers. Peter is a Belgian. He's stubborn. I love the man dearly, like a brother. But I literally had to pound the table and say, you will make this fucking beer. So sometimes being the CEO has its privileges. So I'm moving a bit into more of the industry here. The American craft beer landscape has been crazy. The first thing that we really saw as a shift in the craft zeitgeist was variety. And that kind of goes back to the last slide about collaboration and learning about hoppy beers and brewing different kinds of beers. The second one would certainly be a change in the business model. So I don't know how much of this you have here, but where we are, we own premise is a whole new thing. So there are people who, typically you had a production brewery or you had a brew pub. Now there's a whole segment of the marketplace where people are, their business model is to make money selling beer over their own bar, and they don't have a restaurant with it, so they don't have all of that overhead of a restaurant. And it really kind of, I think, caught the industry by surprise and turned it a bit on its head. In 2015, we were 4,500 breweries. I'm putting my glasses on at this point. I turned 60 this year. I can't see anymore. In 2015, we were 4,500 breweries. We are now nearly 6,500 breweries in 2018. And I believe Bart Watson said that there were 1,200 breweries registered with the TTB as breweries in planning. So whoa up here is like, I'm talking whoa. It is a big thing for us. And one of the themes of this that I'll continue with is that anything that one of us does affects all of us in a lot of ways. And I want to move into the next piece of this, which is about independence. Probably many of you heard this last week that Beavertown sold what was billed as a minority stake to Heineken. Lagunitas was similar, and a minority turned into a majority into 100% at one point. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I am really trying, as these spool out over time, to suspend judgment, because as I said earlier, entrepreneurs need some kind of an exit strategy. But that affects, make no mistake, that affects all of us in this room who are independent. Back to your change of your focus to independent, I think that was wise and a big deal. And it's scary to think about, and there are no really great solutions, except to say that that is not the same thing as saying, I'm going to roll over, you're going to roll over, and let this happen, and, we're all just going to go by the wayside. We possess incredible stories as independent brewers. Our community involvement, our iconoclastic nature. We're amazing touchstones. We support a lot of varied causes and events and commitments to all kinds of interesting business practices. We have distinctive facial hair, and we're intriguing in so many ways. And the big brewers can't own that. They can only borrow it or buy it. And Jorge Paulo Lehmann of 3G Capital, which is the owner of ABI, they have some ownership in SAB Miller, Burger King, Heinz, said, I've been living in this cozy world of brands and big volumes. He admitted that craft beer took him by surprise and then said, in an age of disruption, I'm a terrified dinosaur. We need to continue to terrify the dinosaur, because I think the independent seal and the coming together as a community of independent brewers is really important to our future, success as a collective. And as a part of that, I gave a speech in New Orleans in 2003, and my premise was that not only do we have to have a vision for where we want to go so that we can be enduring, but also that we are all in this together. You have a fairly small percentage of the beer market, and in Australia. By the way, I think it'd be good for you to understand what that percentage is, because you need to be able to mark your progress, talk about who you are, get yourselves focused with both the legislative and regulatory bodies that affect your ability to do business, also to be able to talk to the press and know, like, who are we and how big are we and how much are we growing and what do we stand for. So, when you do really fresh, cool, innovative kinds of things, your brethren benefit from that, because you all own this collective brand called Australian Independent Craft Brewers. Conversely, when you do things that are questionable, we had a recent sort of dust up in the US, I won't go into it, but that also affects the brand called Independent Craft Brewers. And that's an important thing for each of you to consider as you're thinking about, it's everything from quality through, who wins the jump ball to get the ever elusive on-premise tap handle. And those things create rubs. And, it's important that we remember that we also have this collective brand. I want to talk for a minute about quality, because one of the things I have heard, it was really nice to be able to talk to some of you last night, and I talked to people the night before at another event, and one of the things that I've heard is a concern for quality, and we share that concern in the United States. And quality has to be not only table stakes, but a part of our collective legacy. And step one is to know your beers. Do you have written flavor profile standards for all of your beers? Do you know what the shelf life of your beer is if stored in optimal conditions? What about in suboptimal conditions? Is your sensory program developed enough that you have a high degree of confidence about your beer's perceived quality? Do you have go, no-go conversations about your beers every step of the way? We taste beers and analyze them, at least each beer that goes through New Belgium at least 25 times in the process. That's raw materials through the tap. And you can't let up on this stuff. It's really important to our overall success. Your customers are younger to this than our customers in the United States. I still sometimes shake my head at some of the things that I see that people love, and I think that is certainly a matter of brand. But I think at the same time, they will get more sophisticated, and they will begin to discern the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that affects all of us. And all of us who are working hard on this really beseech you to do the same. So from the small, having a microscope and really understanding the health of your yeast, having a DO meter and understanding the implications of that and what it does to the quality of your beer, putting in better systems and standards, all of that. There are ways to do that are simple. There are ways to do that as you get bigger that are more complicated. That's sort of the natural order of how this business goes. But please make sure that you're getting those things done. Make sure that you have a sensory team. Make sure that you're evaluating your beers, that you're having people, these are your babies and they're all beautiful. Have some people who want to tell you which babies are uglier than others, because that's an important part of becoming better brewers. And I think that all of us who have been doing this for a while would beg you to take heed, at least at some level. And one last thing I want to say about that is that Jim Cook said years ago at a conference, if you're not budgeting for bad and out-of-date beer, you really are not committed to quality. So there should be a line item on your P&L for out-of-date and bad beer, because it happens. It's we make a living food, and we need to be able to be honest and free ourselves up to admit that sometimes you have to pull the beer. I think this is my last slide. The last thing I want to say about the industry is the commitment among you. I alluded to that earlier, and I think we're seeing around the world that there's going to be more pressure on all of us through this buying of breweries, through the, there's in the U.S., naming beers is a huge deal because there are so many beers, and you have a name and you go out to use it, and oh, someone else already has that name, and people sue one another, and there are shortages of hops, and there are all kinds of ways that we rub up against one another. And I encourage you to pick up the phone, have a conversation that's focused on best outcomes for everyone involved, keep the collegiality and the conviviality high in the process, because it's kind of like when your friends get a divorce. You don't really want to hear about all the stuff that went on there. You just want to go back to having fun. And it's the same for our beer drinking customers. They want to have fun. They love who we are. It's a distinction for us that we can really take advantage of in the best sense of that word, leverage. And, you know, that doesn't include public squabbles among us about whatever the situation is at hand. So then lastly is getting involved with your trade association. The IBA is clearly, you know, doing a bang-up job of moving you guys into new and exciting territory. And I know as someone, who went through this at the BA, that they need your help. You are the face. They need your stories. They need for you to be on governance committees and government affairs and raw materials and safety and quality. So I encourage you to jump in with your fellow brewers in making the most of what looks like an incredible and vibrant community of craft independent brewers here in Australia. And I thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.